Let's start the video. Subscribe for more stories like the video and hit the bell icon. The galaxy was dying. Its stars were flickering out one by one, consumed by a force older and darker than anything the civilizations of the universe had ever encountered. Known only as the Void, this force swept through the cosmos like a plague, leaving behind nothing but blackened husks of once thriving systems. It was relentless, unstoppable, and it had no mercy. Humanity, having risen from the ashes of its own apocalyptic wars, was now on the precipice of the greatest challenge it had ever faced. Despite their history of conflict, Earth had united under a single banner, one forged by the existential threat of the Void. With their technological advancements in quantum mechanics, artificial intelligence, and spacefaring ships, humanity had managed to carve out a fragile existence across the stars. But now even that was being threatened. The Council of Earth had convened an emergency session in the newly constructed Orbital Command Center, a towering structure floating in the atmosphere of their homeworld. Representatives from every nation, every major corporation, and even the rogue factions that had once fought for power now sat together, each sharing one grim thought: the end was near. The Void had already destroyed countless colonies, and its influence was rapidly creeping closer to Earth's own solar system. The architect of humanity's last hope stood at the center of the room, Dr. Naomi Kessler. A brilliant scientist and the leader of the Ascension protocol, Kessler had spent years preparing for this moment. The protocol was a daring, borderline reckless plan designed to counter the Void using an experimental form of matter that had the potential to generate an energy field strong enough to repel the darkness. If successful, it could not only save humanity but also give the rest of the galaxy a fighting chance. However, the cost of failure was unthinkable. "We don't have time to waste," Kessler said, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the council. "The Void is already in our system. Every hour we wait is an hour we lose." A tall, broad-shouldered man with the unmistakable look of a former military officer, General Michael Reynolds, stood from his seat. His eyes, hardened by decades of war, were sharp as knives. "And what do you propose we do, Dr. Kessler? We've thrown everything we have at it. Every fleet, every weapon, we're losing. The Void has overwhelmed us at every turn. Your so-called Ascension plan sounds like a pipe dream." Kessler met Reynolds' glare with a calm resolve. "The Void is more than just a force of destruction. It's a void in the fabric of reality itself. To defeat it, we must turn its own nature against it. The Ascension protocol will create an energy field strong enough to collapse the Void's influence. But the problem is, we'll need to launch it from the heart of the system, Earth itself." Gasps rippled through the room. The idea of putting Earth at the center of such an operation was a bold gamble, but the alternative was clear: total annihilation. "The core of the system is too dangerous," said a voice from the far end of the table. Dr. Adrian Wu, a leading astrophysicist and Kessler's former mentor. "We don't even fully understand the Void's properties. If we miscalculate, the entire galaxy will be wiped out," Kessler snapped, her patience running thin. "I've studied the Void for years, Dr. Wu. I know its behavior. We've gathered enough data to know that this is our only chance." Reynolds clenched his fists. "You're asking us to risk everything. The people of Earth. The fleets we have left. Our entire future." Kessler's eyes softened, but her voice remained steady. "I'm asking you to believe in humanity's greatest strength. We're not just survivors. We're innovators, creators. We adapt. The Ascension protocol isn't just a weapon, it's our evolution. It's how we take control of our fate, rather than wait for the universe to end us." The silence in the room was palpable. For a moment no one spoke. Then, with a heavy sigh, General Reynolds nodded. "All right. You have my support. But if we're going to do this, we'll need the full resources of the military. And we'll need it now. The Void's already in orbit." Kessler turned to face the rest of the council, her voice growing more impassioned. "We are the last hope of the galaxy. The Ascension protocol will not only save humanity, it will show the galaxy that we are not afraid. We will rise. Together." The decision was made. The Ascension protocol was set into motion. Humanity's ultimate battle had begun. As the final approval for the Ascension protocol was granted, humanity's forces sprang into motion. The military, in coordination with the scientists, began assembling the most advanced warships and research vessels ever built. Each ship, a testament to humanity's ingenuity, was equipped with weapons designed not only for conventional warfare but for survival in the unknown reaches of the universe. But while their military might was impressive, it was the underlying mission that truly set the tone for what lay ahead. Humanity was embarking on a journey unlike any before. Dr. Naomi Kessler stood on the bridge of the Aegis, Earth's flagship, as the massive craft soared into the blackness of space. Her mind was a whirlwind of calculations, projections, and predictions. The Ascension protocol was in motion, but the uncertainty of its success loomed like an insurmountable mountain before her. Despite the support of the Council, there were still those who doubted. And the void. The void was an enigma, nothing like anything humanity had faced before. The fleet's first destination was a remote station on the outer edge of the solar system, where the core of the Ascension device would be constructed. The device, once assembled, would be the most powerful construct ever made by humanity. It was not just a weapon but a beacon, something that would stretch the limits of spacetime itself to unravel the void's grip. Kessler's thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime. A message from General Reynolds, who had been overseeing the fleet's military operations. "Dr. Kessler, we've picked up unusual readings at the edge of our scan range. We believe it's the void. We're seeing abnormal fluctuations in spacetime." Kessler's stomach sank. "Already? It's moving faster than we predicted. We're on a tight timeline, Doctor. We may not have time to reach the station before the void makes contact." "Understood," she replied, her voice steady despite the rising fear in her chest. "Increase speed." We push forward. The Aegis surged forward, its engines roaring to life as the fleet moved deeper into the unknown. The remaining ships, civilians, military, and scientists alike, followed in formation. The vast emptiness of space stretched out before them, and yet the threat of the void was palpable. Inside the heart of the Aegis, Kessler continued to monitor the data streams. Every hour, the void drew closer, a suffocating wave of nothingness, disrupting every sensor and ship within its range. The light from distant stars appeared to bend in unnatural ways, as though the very fabric of reality was beginning to warp under the void's influence. It was then that the fleet scouts began reporting something truly alarming. The void wasn't merely consuming everything in its path, it was adapting. "We've encountered what appear to be drones," one of the scout commanders reported, his voice strained. "They're not like anything we've seen before. They appear to be made of dark matter, and they're drawing energy from the void." Kessler's heart pounded. The void had never shown signs of intelligence before. It was a force of pure destruction. But now, it seemed to be evolving, becoming more than just a cosmic storm. "What kind of drones?" Reynolds asked, his voice dark with concern. "We believe they are scouts or harbingers. They're testing our defenses. They're fast and nearly impossible to track." Kessler stood up, her mind racing. "If the void is evolving, it means it's learning. We can't wait for it to catch up to us. We need to finish the Ascension device ahead of schedule." Reynolds nodded. "Then we'll protect you. Prepare for combat. We'll give you time." It was an uneasy alliance, military power and scientific progress working together, but it was the only chance they had. The fleet increased its pace and the battle for survival intensified. As the Aegis reached the edge of the outer station, Kessler finally had a moment to breathe. The complex stretched out before her, an intricate web of machinery suspended in the cold void. Engineers, scientists, and soldiers worked feverishly to prepare the final components for the Ascension device. It was humanity's last hope. But as the device's energy core began to hum to life, a new wave of dark matter drones emerged from the edge of the void's influence. They were coming faster now, and there were more of them than anyone had anticipated. "We need to hold them off. Now." Reynolds barked. Humanity's resolve would soon be tested. The battle for the future of the galaxy had entered its most dangerous phase, and for the first time the void was showing signs of intelligence. It was no longer just a force. It was becoming something more. And humanity's greatest strength, their adaptability, was all they had left. The fleet hovered near the edge of the station, its forces arrayed in tight formation. The Aegis, flagship of humanity's final hope, loomed like a fortress in the void. The dark matter drones, swarming like a living cloud, hovered in the distance. They were fast, their bodies shifting in and out of phase with the surrounding space. Impossible to track, impossible to hit. And yet they were closing in. Humanity had never faced an enemy like this. General Michael Reynolds stood at the helm of the Aegis, his hands gripping the console as if it were the last tether to his sanity. Around him, the bridge was abuzz with activity. Officers shouted commands, and technicians scrambled to maintain their systems under the strain of the void's growing presence. The dark matter drones were coming faster than anticipated. There was no more time to prepare. The Ascension device needed to be activated or all would be lost. Reynolds' face was grim as he looked at Dr. Naomi Kessler. "Are we ready?" Kessler stood, her gaze fixed on the view screen where the drones approached like shadows on the edge of a dying star. Almost. The energy core is primed, but we need at least 20 more minutes to calibrate the final phase. 20 minutes? Reynolds scoffed, a bitter edge in his voice. We won't last that long. The sudden impact of a blast rocked the ship, throwing everyone off balance. The drones had made their move, launching an initial barrage of energy beams that rattled the fleet. The Aegis shook violently, but its armor held firm. The momentary reprieve was enough for Reynolds to bark his next command. All ships, prepare for combat. We can't let them break our formation. Move to intercept. The fleet's remaining warships, each a marvel of human engineering, broke formation and moved into battle. Their weapons, designed to fight conventional threats, fired in a bright barrage of lasers and plasma. But the drones were unfazed. They were too fast, their bodies composed of dark matter, which absorbed most of the energy fired at them. Each shot was wasted, disappearing into the void without a trace. Direct hits are ineffective, one of the tactical officers shouted, his voice tinged with panic. They're adapting, learning our tactics. Reynolds clenched his jaw. We're not fighting a war of attrition. We need to outsmart them. Kessler's eyes narrowed. We need to disrupt their ability to adapt. If we can create a feedback loop in their energy absorption systems, they'll destabilize. Can you do it? Reynolds demanded. Kessler didn't hesitate. Yes. But I'll need a few minutes to access their energy signatures. We'll have to make a concentrated effort to create a disruption. Then do it, Reynolds ordered. I'll give you those minutes. The battle outside the Aegis intensified as the drones closed in, their dark forms blurring as they shifted through space. One of the human ships, the Pride of Terra, took a direct hit from a drone's energy beam. The ship erupted in a flare of light, its hull cracking as it was torn apart, debris floating into space in the wake of the destruction. The loss hit hard, but the fleet couldn't afford to mourn. Every ship in the fleet was essential, and the war for humanity's survival was escalating rapidly. Inside the Aegis, Kessler worked furiously at the control panel, her fingers flying over the console. I've got their frequency, she muttered to herself. Now I just need to channel it. The drones seemed to notice her efforts, and for the first time they slowed their assault. They recognized that humanity had adapted as well. The air grew thick with tension as Kessler continued to work, her mind focused entirely on her task. Reynolds, she called out. We're ready. Give me everything you've got. All power to the disruptor. Reynolds nodded without a word. His hand slammed down on the command console, and a surge of energy flowed through the Aegis. The ship's engines hummed with raw power, and the disruptor array powered up. The drones, sensing a change in the energy signature, moved to intercept, but it was too late. Kessler hit the final command. A high-pitched tone rang out from the Aegis as the disruptor emitted a pulse of energy, cascading through the nearby void. The feedback loop caught the drones by surprise. Their energy absorption systems, built to adapt to human weaponry, couldn't handle the sudden spike in frequency. One by one the drones began to flicker and destabilize. Their forms quivered as if they were struggling against an unseen force, and then with a collective explosion of dark energy, they disintegrated into the void. The fleet held its breath as the final drone faded from existence. The battle had shifted in humanity's favor. The first strike had been made, and humanity had won for now. But the cost was clear. The fleet had lost precious ships and the void was still closing in. The Ascension device was humanity's last hope, and it had to be activated soon. Reynolds wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes still scanning the skies. We bought ourselves some time. Now, let's make sure the Ascension protocol works. Kessler nodded solemnly. We're almost there. But the hardest part is yet to come. The battle had been a victory, but only a small one in the grand scheme of the war. The fleet had managed to hold off the drones, but the void was relentless, and time was slipping through humanity's fingers like sand. The Ascension device, humanity's last hope, was nearly ready, but there was still one insurmountable challenge: getting it to work. Dr. Naomi Kessler stood in the center of the control room, her eyes fixed on the monitors. The engineers were working feverishly around her, but her mind was elsewhere. It wasn't just the Ascension device that occupied her thoughts. Something about the Void's recent behavior nagged at her. The drones had adapted too quickly. They had been more coordinated, more intelligent, than they had ever been before. The Void, it seemed, was evolving faster than any of them could anticipate. We're ready to initiate the final sequence, one of the engineers said, breaking her concentration. His voice was taut with tension as if he, too, could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on them. Kessler nodded absently. Proceed. But we need to be sure the device is fully calibrated. One misstep and it could trigger a catastrophic reaction. We cannot afford another failure. The engineers worked faster, checking the core stabilizers and ensuring that the quantum generators were synced. The Ascension device was an extraordinary piece of technology, a blend of cutting-edge science and pure human ingenuity. It was designed to generate a field powerful enough to break through the void's energy field and reverse its devastating effects. The core would release a concentrated burst of quantum energy, altering the very fabric of spacetime. The challenge was finding the right threshold. Too little and it would have no effect. Too much and it could trigger a chain reaction that would destroy everything within reach. As the last calibration was completed, Kessler stepped away from the console, her face pale with the weight of the decision. General Reynolds approached her, his expression hard, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. Are you sure about this? He asked. We've seen what happens when we push the limits of science. The unknowns are, well, they're still unknown. Kessler turned to face him. Her voice was unwavering, but her eyes were tired. This is the only way. The void has already destroyed too much. We don't have the luxury of hesitation. The device must be activated now, or we risk losing everything. Reynolds didn't argue. Instead, he simply nodded, signaling to the crew to begin the activation sequence. The sound of the countdown filled the room, a steady beep echoing through the metallic walls. Kessler took a deep breath, her heart racing in sync with the ticking clock. In the distance, the void loomed, ever closer, its dark influence pressing against the edge of the solar system. The fleet was ready, but they were not prepared for the shock that was coming. As the final seconds ticked away, the energy core of the Ascension device began to hum, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to resonate within Kessler's very bones. The device was charging, ready to unleash the power of 1,000 suns. Suddenly, a pulse rippled through space, an invisible wave that distorted the very fabric of reality. The countdown halted. What the hell was that? Reynolds shouted, his eyes darting to the tactical readouts. The void had sent a response. A pulse, different from anything humanity had encountered before, had made contact with the Ascension device. Kessler's heart skipped a beat. The feedback was undeniable. The void had known they were preparing something. The void, it's reacting, Kessler said, her voice almost a whisper. It's trying to interfere with the device's energy flow. Another pulse erupted, stronger this time, reverberating through the aegis like a thunderclap in space. The station trembled as the energy from the Ascension device flared and flickered, destabilizing. No, 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 Kessler shouted. It's trying to hijack the core's frequency. Reynolds moved quickly, slamming his hand on the command panel. Divert all power to the shielding. We need to stabilize the energy flow. The engineers scrambled, their faces lit by the flickering holograms as they worked to counteract the void's influence. But it was clear, the void was no longer a passive force. It was aware of the Ascension device. And it was fighting back. On the bridge, Kessler's mind raced. The void had never shown signs of intelligence like this. It wasn't just a cosmic anomaly. It was evolving, adapting, fighting for control. The longer they delayed, the greater the risk that the device would become unstable, its own energy feeding into the void's dark grasp. We need to push forward, Kessler said, determination in her voice. The device is our only chance. It's the only way to stop the void from consuming everything. Reynolds met her gaze, the weight of their shared mission settling over them like a dark cloud. You're right. But we need to act fast. We're not fighting just for survival anymore. We're fighting for the future of the galaxy. As the countdown resumed, a final deafening pulse from the void sent a shockwave through the fleet, disrupting the flow of power to the Ascension device. It was now or never. Kessler braced herself, her fingers hovering over the final command. Initiate the sequence, she ordered. The energy core flared brightly, and the universe held its breath. The Ascension device's core erupted with light, illuminating the darkness of space like a newborn star. The raw power unleashed was almost too much for the fleet's sensors to handle, forcing technicians to recalibrate on the fly. The station's energy conduits glowed a searing white as the device reached the final phase of activation. Dr. Naomi Kessler gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white. She watched as data streamed across the monitors, showing the device's energy field expanding outward, rippling through the fabric of spacetime. It was working, but only barely. The void's interference was more aggressive than expected, and the device was fighting for stability. On the bridge of the Aegis, General Reynolds barked orders. All ships, maintain defensive positions. Keep those drones away from the station at all costs. The Void wasn't retreating. If anything, it was growing more active. The drones returned in force, swarming in greater numbers than before. They moved with eerie precision, converging on the fleet like a coordinated pack of predators. Their dark forms shimmered, absorbing the light from the Ascension device's energy burst as they sought to dismantle humanity's last hope. The Aegis and the other warships opened fire, their weapons blazing in a desperate attempt to hold the line. Missiles and plasma beams streaked through the void, striking the drones, but the enemy continued to adapt. For every drone destroyed, 2 more seemed to emerge from the depths of the void's influence. Reynolds turned to his tactical officer. Status report. Shields are holding but barely, the officer replied, his voice strained. The void's interference is destabilizing our systems. We're detecting anomalies across the fleet. Some ships are reporting engine malfunctions. Reynolds clenched his fists. The fleet was barely holding together and the drones were relentless. But his gaze drifted to the central monitor, where the Ascension device's energy signature pulsed like a beating heart. They could just hold out a little longer. On the station, Kessler and her team worked frantically to maintain the device's stability. Alarms blared as the energy core fluctuated, threatening to overload. The Void's interference was pushing the device to its limits, and every second felt like an eternity. It's not enough, one of the engineers shouted. The Void is absorbing too much of the energy field. We can't reach critical mass. Kessler's mind raced. The device was designed to create a ripple effect, a chain reaction that would disrupt the Void's influence across the galaxy. But if the Void was actively countering their efforts, the energy field might never reach the necessary threshold. Unless... There's a way, Kessler muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Her eyes darted to the schematic of the Ascension device on her console. We need to amplify the core's output. Overload the system. The lead engineer looked at her in shock. That's insane. If we push the core beyond its limits, it could collapse in on itself. It would destroy the station, and us. Kessler's gaze was resolute. If we don't, the Void will consume everything. We have no other choice. The room fell silent. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. The crew exchanged glances, each of them silently calculating the odds of survival. But there was no time for debate. The Void was closing in, and the drones were already starting to breach the fleet's defenses. Reynolds' voice crackled over the comms. Kessler, we're running out of time. What's your status? She took a deep breath, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. We're going to amplify the core's output. It's a risk, but it's our only shot. There was a pause on the other end. Then Reynolds' voice came through, firm and unwavering. Do it. We'll buy you the time you need. The command was given, and the engineers moved quickly, rerouting power to the core and disabling the safety protocols. The hum of the Ascension device grew into a deafening roar as the energy output surged. The station trembled, its structural integrity pushed to the brink. Outside, the fleet fought desperately to hold the line. The drones were everywhere, their dark forms weaving through the chaos of battle. Ships exploded in fiery bursts, but the remaining vessels pressed on, their crews determined to protect the device at all costs. The Ascension device's energy field expanded, rippling outward in a blinding wave of light. For a moment, the Void seemed to falter. The drones hesitated, their movements erratic as the energy field disrupted their connection to the Void. But the surge wasn't enough. The Void pushed back, its dark presence pressing against the field like a tidal wave. Kessler's hands flew over the console. The core was nearing its limit. One more push and it would either succeed, or destroy them all. Prepare for overload, she ordered. This is it. The countdown began. The station groaned under the strain, its metal frame twisting as the energy core reached critical mass. Kessler's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of humanity's future resting on this single moment. 3, 2, 1. The core detonated, unleashing a burst of energy so powerful it shattered the boundaries of spacetime itself. The Void recoiled, its dark tendrils retreating as the light of the Ascension device consumed the battlefield. For a moment there was only silence. The battlefield was a kaleidoscope of chaos, frozen in the wake of the Ascension device's activation. The brilliant burst of energy had wiped out the immediate swarm of dark matter drones, reducing them to formless wisps that dissolved into the Void. The Void itself recoiled, its oppressive influence peeling back like a veil. For the first time in centuries, stars hidden by its darkness reappeared, casting faint glimmers of hope across the fleet. Inside the Aegis, silence reigned. General Reynolds stared at the central view screen, his face lit by the ghostly light of the dying battle. Around him, the bridge crew sat in stunned disbelief, too shaken to process what had just occurred. "Status report," Reynolds barked, his voice cutting through the heavy quiet. A tactical officer scrambled to respond, his hands trembling as he scanned the monitors. "The drones, they're gone, sir. All of them. No activity within a 100,000-kilometer radius." He paused, his voice thick with awe. "The void, it's retreating?" Reynolds exhaled, a sound that was equal parts relief and exhaustion. "And the station? What's Kessler's status?" Before the officer could respond, the comms crackled to life. Dr. Naomi Kessler's voice came through, strained but triumphant. "We're here." The device held, but barely. In the Ascension device's control room, Kessler sat slumped against the console, her body heavy with exhaustion. The room was a wreck. Sparks flew from shattered panels and smoke curled from the overheated systems. Her team worked in near silence, many of them too drained to speak. "Dr. Kessler," Reynolds' voice came through the comms, "what's the situation on your end? Are you secure?" Kessler forced herself to stand, her legs shaking as she surveyed the devastation. "We're alive, but the device is spent. The energy core is completely drained, and the stabilization matrix is fried. We won't be able to fire it again." Reynolds frowned. "Is it enough? Have we stopped the void?" Kessler hesitated, her eyes drifting to the massive display showing the edge of the void. The dark expanse had retreated, but it wasn't gone. It loomed in the distance, pulsating faintly as if wounded but not defeated. "It's weakened," she said finally. The device pushed it back, disrupted its control. "But it's still there. And it's still dangerous." Reynolds' jaw tightened. "Understood. We'll regroup and assess the situation. Get your team stabilized and prepare a full report." Kessler nodded, though her mind was already racing. The void had shown signs of intelligence, of purpose. The Ascension device had worked, but it hadn't eradicated the threat. It was as if the void had been testing them. The fleet limped back to a nearby safe zone, their battered ships forming a loose defensive perimeter. Crews worked tirelessly to repair the damage, salvaging what they could from destroyed vessels. The cost of the battle was staggering. Nearly a third of the fleet had been lost, along with countless lives. In the war room aboard the Aegis, Reynolds, Kessler, and the remaining senior officers gathered to discuss their next move. A holographic projection of the void hovered above the table, its dark form still pulsating ominously. "This isn't over," Kessler said, breaking the uneasy silence. "The void is weakened, yes, but it's far from destroyed. If we don't find a way to eliminate it completely, it will come back. Stronger than before." Admiral Connors, a grizzled veteran with a scar running across his temple, folded his arms. "We threw everything we had at it and barely scratched the surface. What more can we do?" Kessler's eyes burned with determination. "The Ascension device was only the first step. We need to go further. We need to understand the void, what it is, where it came from, and how to stop it permanently." Reynolds leaned forward, his expression grim. "You're suggesting we take the fight to the void itself?" "Yes," Kessler said without hesitation. "The void isn't just some natural phenomenon. It's a living entity, or at least something close to it. And if it's alive, it has a core, a source. We need to find it and destroy it." The room fell silent. The idea was unthinkable, yet no one could deny the truth in Kessler's words. Humanity couldn't afford to wait for the void to recover and strike again. Admiral Connors shook his head. "Even if we could locate its core, we don't have the resources for an offensive operation. Half the fleet is gone. The Ascension device is offline. We're barely holding together as it is. That's why we need to adapt," Kessler countered. "The void has been evolving. So must we." She gestured to the hologram of the void. "I'll need access to all the data we've collected, every scan, every reading. If we can identify its vulnerabilities, we might be able to develop a weapon capable of targeting its core." Reynolds nodded slowly. "It's a long shot, but it's better than waiting to be overrun." He turned to Connors. "Start pulling the fleet back together. Prioritize repairs and resupply efforts. We'll need every ship ready for the next phase." "And what about the crew?" Connors asked. "Morale is already at its breaking point. How do we keep them fighting?" Reynolds' gaze hardened. "We remind them what's at stake. Humanity's survival depends on this. And we don't stop until we've won." As the meeting adjourned, Kessler lingered in the war room, staring at the hologram of the void. Her mind was filled with questions. About the void, its purpose, and what humanity would have to sacrifice to defeat it. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. But beneath the fear there was resolve. Humanity had faced the impossible before. It would do so again. The fleet worked tirelessly to recover from the aftermath of the battle. Damaged ships were patched, weapons were reloaded, and makeshift repairs were made to the Ascension device. While the void had been weakened, its ominous presence still loomed in the distance, a silent reminder that the war was far from over. Dr. Naomi Kessler's makeshift lab aboard the Aegis had become a hub of desperate innovation. Data streamed in from every sensor that had survived the battle. She pored over readings of energy patterns, void distortions, and traces of matter that seemed to defy the known laws of physics. The void wasn't just an entity, it was a realm, one that seemed to exist outside the bounds of the universe. The revelation came late in the night cycle, as Kessler stared at a holographic projection of the void's energy field. Among the chaos of readings, a faint pattern emerged, almost imperceptible but there. A single pulse repeating every 37 minutes. "It's a signal," Kessler whispered, her heart racing. The void wasn't just reacting to the Ascension device, it was communicating. In the war room, Kessler presented her findings to General Reynolds and the senior officers. "The void is sending out a signal likely to its core. This is the key to finding its heart." She zoomed in on the data, highlighting the pulse. "If we can trace this signal back to its origin, we can locate the void's core and destroy it." Reynolds frowned, arms crossed. "And how do you propose we get close enough to follow the signal? The last time we faced the void directly, we barely survived." Kessler hesitated, but only for a moment. "We'll need to go deeper into the void than anyone ever has. A small, specialized strike team, equipped with a portable version of the Ascension device. If we can get close enough, we can use it to target the core directly." The room erupted into murmurs. The void's core was the most dangerous place imaginable, a realm of pure chaos where the rules of space and time didn't apply. Admiral Connors shook his head. "That's a suicide mission. Even if we find the core, how do you plan to survive long enough to activate the device?" "We adapt," Kessler said, her voice firm. "The void has been evolving, but so can we. The drones that attacked us were using void-based energy fields. If we can reverse engineer that technology, we might be able to shield ourselves long enough to complete the mission." Reynolds leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "How long will it take?" Kessler glanced at her tablet, her calculations incomplete but clear enough. 3 weeks. Maybe less if we divert all resources to development and testing." 3 weeks, Reynolds repeated, rubbing his temples. He turned to Connors. "Can the fleet hold out that long?" Connors grimaced. "We're stretched thin. If the void retaliates, it'll be touch and go. But if this plan works..." He trailed off, letting the weight of the decision settle. Reynolds nodded. "Then we go all in. Kessler, you have your 3 weeks. Get it done." As the fleet prepared for what might be its final mission, Kessler and her team worked around the clock. They dismantled salvaged drones, studying their energy fields and extracting fragments of void matter. The work was grueling, and more than once, the volatile materials threatened to destabilize. The breakthrough came on the 15th day. Using void matter as a stabilizing agent, Kessler's team developed a prototype energy shield that could withstand the void's corrosive influence. The technology was crude, but it was enough. With the prototype complete, Kessler turned her attention to the portable Ascension device, a stripped-down version of the original designed for one purpose: to destroy the void's core. Reynolds personally oversaw the selection of the strike team. Only the most skilled and experienced were chosen: pilots, engineers, soldiers, and scientists willing to risk everything. Among them was Captain Elias Ward, the fleet's best pilot and one of the few people who had survived a direct encounter with the void. On the eve of the mission, Kessler stood in the hangar watching as the strike ship, a heavily modified frigate codenamed Vanguard, was prepped for launch. Ward approached her, his expression calm but resolute. "Do you think this will work?" he asked. Kessler didn't answer immediately. She stared at the void in the distance, its dark tendrils pulsating faintly. "I don't know," she admitted. "But if we do nothing, the void will destroy us anyway. At least this way we have a chance." Ward nodded. "Then we make it count." The Vanguard launched at dawn, carrying the hopes of humanity into the heart of darkness. As the ship entered the void, its shields flared, protecting it from the corrosive energy field. The journey was disorienting, space twisted and folded, light bending in impossible ways. The signal grew stronger as they ventured deeper. On board, Kessler monitored the readings, her heart pounding as the patterns became clearer. The Void's core was close. But so was the danger. Drones emerged from the shadows, more numerous and more aggressive than ever before. Ward piloted the Vanguard with precision, weaving through the swarm as the ship's turrets opened fire. The shields flickered, strained by the Void's energy, but they held. Finally they reached the core, a swirling vortex of energy pulsating with unimaginable power. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, a living storm at the center of a dying galaxy. Kessler activated the portable Ascension device, her hand steady despite the chaos around her. "This is it," she said, her voice calm. "We either end it here or we don't leave at all." Ward nodded, his jaw set. "Let's finish this." As the device charged, the Void reacted. The core began to pulse violently, sending shockwaves through the Void. The drones closed in, their attacks relentless. Time was running out. The Vanguard buckled under the strain as the Void unleashed its fury. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, slamming into the ship's shields and causing alarms to blare across every deck. Captain Ward gripped the controls, his knuckles white as he maneuvered the vessel through the storm. "Shields at 15%, one of the engineers yelled. "We can't take much more of this." Dr. Kessler didn't look up from the console. The portable Ascension device hummed with energy, its core glowing brighter with each passing second. The readings on her screen showed the charge nearing critical mass, but the Void was adapting faster than she had anticipated. "We need more time," Kessler shouted over the chaos. Ward's voice cut through the noise. "You've got 3 minutes. After that, we're either out of here or dead." The Void's core loomed before them, a swirling vortex of energy that seemed alive. Its pulses grew erratic as though it sensed the threat. Around it, drones swarmed in an endless tide, their dark forms converging on the Vanguard from all directions. "Focus fire on the drones," Ward ordered. The ship's turrets roared, cutting through the nearest wave, but it was like trying to hold back the ocean with a bucket. Kessler's hands moved with surgical precision, her mind racing. The Ascension device's field generator was online, but the Void's interference was destabilizing the connection. She knew the calculations were incomplete, there was no guarantee the device would function as intended. But there was no time to second-guess. "We're at 90% charge," she called out. Ward glanced at the tactical display, his jaw tightening as he saw the drones closing in. "We're out of time, document." "Do it now." Kessler hesitated, her finger hovering over the activation button. The energy field wasn't fully stabilized. If she fired now, the device might not destroy the Void, it might just make things worse. Then she looked at the faces around her. The crew, the soldiers, the people who had fought and sacrificed everything for this moment. And she thought of the billions of lives still depending on them. "Activating the device," she shouted. She pressed the button. The Ascension device's core erupted with light, a blinding pulse that spread outward in a shockwave. The energy field expanded, cutting through the Void's darkness like a blade. The drones froze mid-flight, their forms disintegrating as the wave passed over them. The Void itself reacted violently. Its tendrils writhed and lashed out, but the energy field consumed them, unraveling the fabric of its existence. The core began to collapse in on itself, its once majestic vortex shrinking as the light overwhelmed it. On board the Vanguard, the crew braced themselves as the ship was caught in the storm. The shields flickered and failed, leaving the vessel exposed to the chaos. "Structural integrity is failing," the engineer shouted. Ward gritted his teeth. "Hold on." Kessler watched the readings, her heart pounding as the Void's energy levels plummeted. The core was destabilizing faster than she had hoped. If they didn't get out now, they would be pulled into the collapse. "The core is imploding," she yelled. "We need to move, now." Ward didn't need to be told twice. He slammed the controls, pushing the Vanguard to its limits. The ship lurched forward, engines screaming as it raced away from the collapsing core. Behind them, the Void's vortex shrank into a single point of light before vanishing entirely. And then there was silence. The Vanguard emerged from the Void's boundary into open space, the stars shining brighter than ever before. The crew sat in stunned silence, the weight of what they had just witnessed settling over them. "It's gone," Kessler whispered, her voice trembling. "The Void, it's really gone." Ward leaned back in his chair, exhaling a shaky breath. "We did it." The comms crackled to life as General Reynolds' voice came through. "Vanguard, this is the Aegis. What's your status?" Ward grinned, exhaustion evident in his voice. "Mission accomplished, General. The Void is no more." Cheers erupted across the fleet. Ships that had been battered and broken in the fight now celebrated the impossible victory. For the first time in centuries, humanity had defied the darkness and won. In the days that followed, the fleet began the long journey home. The destruction of the void sent ripples across the galaxy, restoring light to corners that had been lost to darkness for eons. Humanity's resilience had not only saved themselves but had sparked hope for countless other civilizations. Dr. Kessler stood on the observation deck of the Aegis, staring out at the stars. She felt a deep sense of pride, but also a lingering unease. The void was gone, but the galaxy was vast, and its mysteries were infinite. Ward joined her, his hands shoved into his pockets. "You're thinking about what comes next, aren't you?" Kessler nodded. The void was just one threat. There's so much we don't understand about the universe. About ourselves? Ward smirked. Then I guess we've got work to do. She turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. Yes, we do. As the Aegis moved through the stars, its crew carried with them the knowledge that humanity had faced the ultimate darkness, and emerged victorious. But they also knew that the galaxy still held countless challenges. And humanity would be ready. The end.